Welcome, everybody. I am Robyn with Scaling Up, and I am really excited to be talking with Lori today. She is the Executive Director of Trauma Recovery HAP, and we are going to be talking all about the work of Trauma Recovery HAP and the upcoming conference that is happening this August in Denver, Colorado, and the collaboration that we at Scaling Up have with HAP this year. So tune in. We're really excited to talk with you, Lori. Thank you so much for agreeing to chat with me today. And would you please introduce yourself and your work and kind of what brought you into this work as well, so folks can get to know you a little bit?
Yeah. So my name is Lori Pereira, and like Robyn said, I am the Executive Director of Trauma Recovery, EMDR Humanitarian Assistance Programs Incorporated, otherwise known as Trauma Recovery HAP or HAP. And so how I came to this work, I am actually a trained clinician. So I like to say I cut my teeth in community mental health. And while working in a school-based setting and day treatment setting, I was asked to attend a trauma recovery HAP EMDR basic training in the basement of a small agency in Wilmington, Delaware. And really, that is where my journey begins. I was so inspired by EMDR, it became my focus in my clinical practice, as well as I was really impressed with the trainers and the facilitators. They were all volunteers. And because they were volunteering, they made it possible for me to be trained. As a new clinician, we all know in community mental health, the pay is not great. And so I couldn't afford the traditional EMDR therapy training program. And so by having this option through HAP, this nonprofit option, the cost was reasonable. And then also the consultants then provided consultation at a significantly reduced rate. And because of them, I was able to successfully implement EMDR into my own practice. Also, while sitting in that training, I realized I wanted to be a part of it. The mission and everything they spoke about really spoke to me, and wanting to make sure that everyone had access to EMDR therapy, no matter how much money they made, no matter where they lived. I wanted to make sure everyone, the clinicians and as well as clients, had access to EMDR therapy. So that's kind of where my journey began. Fast forward many years later, I then started to implement EMDR therapy programs in community mental health centers, and my goal was to build self-sustaining programs so that the community mental health centers could afford and continue to have this evidence-based therapy at their as one of their resources. By doing that, I began to partner with HAP and bringing trainings to our community mental health center. And then I became a facilitator and then eventually was asked to be a trainer. And then right around COVID, I was asked to join our clinical consultant team here at Trauma Recovery HAP. And the role there was to help build our faculty program and ensure that we had one of the best, highest quality and consistent basic training programs. Then eventually I then started to come on board and helping with the clinical side of what's called trauma recovery networks or our TRNs. That's the other side of our business where we really work on building a network of clinicians around the United States, Canada, Puerto Rico, and some other countries where we have clinicians ready to respond to man-made natural disasters or mass impact events. And they provide up to 5 free therapy sessions after a disaster and really focusing now on what we call the early or the EMDR informed early interventions, which we'll talk about in a little bit here too. So, um, and then about 9 months ago, I took over as executive director of HAP. So HAP has always been a part of my heart. It's been a part of my work, whether as a clinician, facilitator, trainer, or now as the executive director. I hope that answered the question.
No, it did. It was great. Thank you so much. I didn't know that I didn't know about your early experience and like HAP was your door in with EMDR in that sense. And that's wonderful, amazing. I remember after I completed my basic training, one of the first groups I heard about was HAP. It's like, what is this? And it almost felt like, it was part of the introduction to the EMDR community. It's like, great, you're trained now. Learn about HAP. So thought that was really wonderful. Thank you for sharing that history and how you got into this work and where you are now. I think it's really wonderful. Um, you mentioned during that, you talked about you were really drawn to the mission of HAP. Can you talk a little bit about the mission of HAP? Because you and I know what disaster response means or humanitarian response or aid. You and I know what that is, but not all EMDR clinicians know what that means and know the importance of having a community hub, a group of folks in your area, or even places like HAP and Scaling Up that really support folks in their disaster response work or their humanitarian work or their community crisis intervention work. So can you please tell us a little bit about that so folks can kind of get there like, oh my gosh, the aha moment for them, like I need to get in on this.
Yeah. So I'm just going to read you the mission. So the mission of HAP is to increase the capacity for effective treatment of psychological trauma in underserved communities anywhere in the world. Today, the mission is reflected in hundreds of low-cost training workshops and expanding online curriculum, educational outreach and training, preparation of clients and online infrastructure for local trauma recovery networks, focused international projects to establish sustainable EMDR therapy, treatment capability in developing countries, and collaboration with researchers to share knowledge and findings worldwide. And so when we talk about HAP, right, the fun thing is we're celebrating 30 years of what people know as HAP today. But HAP is kind of on this, although we've been around for 30 years, the mission has stayed the same, but how we execute that mission may look a little different. So 30 years ago, when HAP started after the Oklahoma City bombing, the mission was to make sure that we had trained EMDR clinicians ready to respond anywhere in the world after disaster. So HAP was very much responsible for taking EMDR therapy and bringing it worldwide. So many of the projects that have started have then developed into EMDR Europe, EMDR Asia, EMDR Africa, MENA. So HAP has been instrumental in making sure that EMDR therapy is brought worldwide, and not just where our clinicians go in and train and help or rescue people in their country. That's not the goal. The goal is to build self-sustaining programs. So that means we come in, we train a core group of clinicians who then, through mentoring, take EMDR therapy and make sure that it's culturally relevant, that it's also trained in a culturally relevant way, and they continue to support clinicians in their own countries while we are there to help consult or possibly help provide funding to help them build their capacity. So that was a lot of the work that HAP did in the early years. Now, how it's reflected in what we're really focusing on in this coming year in our strategic plan is looking at how do we tackle the wealth gap, not just internationally, but here in the United States. We have a lot of amazing clinicians who want to be trained, and not just basic trained, who want to be able to become experts, be certified, and then, when appropriate, identify those clinicians who should become consultants in training, approved consultants, and possibly part of the training faculty, right? And so we're trying to build a program where we're now starting to support clinicians beyond basic training and really focusing on the community mental health centers, our nonprofits, schools, and government agencies so that they have access to low-cost advanced trainings and consultation. Another way that you're going to see our new work reflected in the mission is research. We would like to really come back to one of the things that Francine said in almost every presentation: research, research, research. So what HAP is currently fundraising for we have an annual walk. It's a virtual walk taking place right now the whole month of June. And all the proceeds will go to funding a HIPAA compliant data management, basically research hub. And so this is a place for our TRNs or other people who apply to be able to have access to a cloud-based HIPAA compliant tech tool that allows them to build out surveys and include their assessments. It makes it very easy to get pre and post assessment data, which one of the things that we have learned a lot from scaling up and from their work is field research. And so that is another way I think our partnership has helped is that you and scaling up and Nacho and Nicole have really shared the field research information because we do believe that is one of the things that we can do better on in our mission to support research worldwide. Um, and we do have a project going on where we are working and partnering with ALAC. And ALAC is our Latin America partners in EMDR therapy. And we are running a project in Barbados where we are training 17 clinicians, bringing EMDR for the first time to Barbados. And each clinician only had to pay $50 for this training, and everything else is fully funded. And so our hope again is to help Barbados and the Caribbean islands really establish a self-sustaining region in EMDR, and then they will join ALAC. So that is another example of our partnerships worldwide and trying to reflect our mission. The one thing I haven't talked about was our TRNs, our trauma recovery networks. This is a huge focus this year, and you're going to see that reflected in our conference. We truly believe now more than ever, our trauma recovery networks are going to be more important. Unfortunately, we have a lot of adverse events and trauma occurring daily in the United States and worldwide. And our trauma recovery networks are there and going to be prepared to provide free services and really looking at ways to support healing and resiliency. Because as Francine and Wolf Carrier had said, Ralph Carrier has said, is that trauma is one of the biggest impacts on the lack of peace or increase of war and fighting or famine and poverty. And so we believe that our trauma recovery networks are going to be more important today and in the future. So a big focus of our trauma recovery networks is preparing people, having them ready to respond. And so our conference is really meant to start introducing disaster response to anybody in the EMDR community. You don't have to just be a HAP faculty member or a HAP member to come to our conference. Anybody trained in EMDR. And this is a great way to start building your expertise to be able to respond post disaster or a mass impact event, as well as increase your ability to do group interventions. And so I'm going to kind of lead that into the conference and our partnership with Scaling Up, because this is our goal this year is to make sure that our TRNs and our EMDR clinicians worldwide are ready to respond, are ready to support people.
Wonderful. Yes, thank you for that. I love the ways that our missions intersect and support one another. And it's why we're so excited to be, part of the greater HAP network in
Mhm.
various ways throughout the years, and are excited to see how this continues to grow going forward. We are really excited about this year's conference to celebrate 30 years of HAP.
Yeah.
So congrats.
Yes.
30 years and excited for the next 30. And we agree, we at Scaling Up agree that it's really important to prepare clinicians all over the world and also support them in accessing trainings and accessing connections with one another and trying to break down barriers that have put in place systemically or in other ways, sometimes geographically, sometimes because of mass impact events, we are cut off from each other, such as, the wildfires that happened in California earlier this year, and the floods in North Carolina. And in that region, there's so many people cut off from each other and they didn't know how to connect. And I'm sure your inboxes got flooded, ours got flooded with like, what do we do? Who's out there? And
Mhm.
oftentimes, because life is so full, there's so many things to pay attention to. We don't know where to go until the moment hits. We don't think we need a type of training or a type of support. We don't realize that there are resources and
Mhm.
relationships that we don't have that we actually need. And so we are really excited to support the growth in awareness and growth in numbers of TRNs around
Yep.
the US and beyond, because we know how important that is. We can't go it alone. HAP can't go it alone. None of y'all can go it alone. So we need to figure
Yep.
out ways to create more access to those connections with each other and build those genuine professional relationships. And, sometimes you get some BFFs out of it too, because this work is really important. And also, it's something that tugs at all of our hearts. And we often say yes too many times. We don't take breaks. So creating a great network will help you
Mhm.
be able to take care of yourself, your loved ones, and your community as well. And tap out when you need to tap out, and you know who to go to, and ask, hey, can you tap in? So it's really important to have these networks, whether we hope you join a TRN, or something else, so that you're able to be supported and support those in your community with all the care and integrity that you can. um, you talked about, Lori, briefly about the importance of making sure that folks were trained in this specific type of intervention, how to intervene after a climate disaster, or how to intervene after a community violence, active community violence, or maybe the death of someone like a school leader, a beloved school leader, or the impact of socio-political initiatives. Or, I mean, we're experiencing this right now and have forever in the US, and around the world, but the way that political decisions and different social programs, how those are enacted or taken away, systemic oppression, different forms of violence and harm impact all of our community members, including ourselves. Sometimes we're the one that need to be in the group intervention.
Yeah.
Systemic oppression, racism, ableism, all of these things um, can happen on the small scale, right? You might be working with an individual client, you might be working with a family or an entire community that experienced something, an entire town or an entire region of folks that were impacted, or an entire nation. How do you respond when you don't know any other protocols other than the standard protocol? And it's not even,
Mhm.
in my opinion, it's not even just what protocol do you have, right? Because you could have an advanced protocol, right? Like the EMDR HAP protocols. But if you don't know how to use them in a way that meets the needs of the folks that experience that disaster or high impact event, um, then you're also still going to not be able to, create that support and that change that those people are seeking. And so, in addition, we'll talk about some protocols that can be really beneficial for responding.
Yep.
But what else do you think is important that therapists learn as they are deciding, yes, I want to learn how to do this because it could happen at any moment and will happen in my community, and I want to be someone involved in that in whatever capacity that I can. What do I need to learn as a person, as a therapist, beyond the protocols?
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest thing first and foremost is that in our field, in our ethics, we say do no harm. And sometimes when we have the best of intentions and we go in because we want to help, we inadvertently cause harm. And that's when we're not trained. And I think the most important thing is first and foremost is having that team together helps us work together to plan and also be aware of those cultural aspects. Because, like you said, responding to a school shooting is different than responding to a fire, which is different to responding to, for example, when George Floyd was killed in Minnesota. All of these responses require different cultural considerations, but also different use of our EMDR our EMDR informed early interventions, right? And so it is important, I think, to have that team approach because not everybody can be trained in everything.
Exactly.
And we also need providers who can work with children and families versus adults first responders, other helpers, right? So we all have expertise, and it's important that we are continually training and recognizing what is our expertise and where do we need to lean in for additional training, but also maybe when we have to tap out and lean in on another provider. And so having those teams really helps out. And so when I look at EMDR therapy, so EMDR therapy, when everybody's trained in basic training, that is called the standard protocol. We're also learning what's called the EMDR continuum and how to navigate the path, the three prongs, past, present, and future. And so in your basic training, you do learn EMD, eye movement desensitization, as well as most training programs are teaching the traditional recent events protocol. Both EMD and recent events protocol can be effective. But again, I think it's very, very important that we are learning group-based interventions because what we've learned in many of these different types of responses, we have to have group work available. We don't have enough clinicians to do all one-on-one work, and that will actually create a lot of burnout. And so making sure that you're also trained in basic disaster behavioral response, psychological first aid, because in the United States, specifically, when you're working with FEMA or other national and state and local teams, they will speak that language, and it's important to understand that. So I really recommend that if you want to do disaster response work, that you visit FEMA and you visit and learn more about the difference between disaster response and recovery and what all entails, because it's important to know your team members and have common language. And then looking at the different EMDR informed protocols. And I do call the early interventions protocols. To me, protocol is a word that we have to dance around lightly because oftentimes a protocol is actually just an adaptation or difference in case conceptualization on the standard protocol. But when we're looking at the EMDR early or the EMDR informed early interventions, they are standalone protocols, right? They are using the AIP to inform how we do this early intervention with the understanding that memories have not consolidated and stored into long-term memory, as well as they're tailored to group interventions and looking at the level of activation of trauma. When we are moving into a disaster response, the goal is not to stir up and activate a bunch of trauma, right? The goal is to stabilize. And I think that is one of the biggest misconceptions that clinicians have is they're going to go in and do full standard protocol, past, present, future, when really the goal is stabilization and hopefully stopping the progression of acute stress disorder to PTSD and other mood disorders, as well as build resiliency and community resiliency. I'm going to pause there, Robyn. Did I answer your question?
Good. Yes. Yes. Yeah. I think that's an important distinction that we often make as well at scaling up because people always ask us, what's the difference between, we call it crisis intervention or crisis
Mhm.
response and early intervention, because they are distinct. I think when you talk about the EMDR early interventions, you're saying it the same way that we say crisis response.
Yes.
So, for example, our assist treatment interventions are exactly that. They serve to stabilize, triage, and hopefully prevent, as you said, the
Yeah.
development of PTSD or other um, mental health distressors or anxieties diagnoses, or the
Hmm.
exacerbation of pre-existing diagnoses as well. Um,
Hmm.
and it is really crucial to understand that. I know it took me a little while to understand that as well. When
Yep.
I was first doing it, I was like, I don't understand how this is. Why can't I? Why can't I? And so it took me a little while to really learn and go through a few instances with folks, even on smaller scales, even after they had the weekend and there was this big announcement in the family that was really devastating, so it's like on a tiny scale of like intervening after this really stressful or potentially traumatic event, and then being able to use a intervention or a protocol or an approach to help stabilize and to help build that resiliency and to help fortify maybe, so that there isn't a long-term effect on that event or on that person from that event. I think that's really crucial to understand the difference. And you're right, without that training, you wouldn't know. And you might, go
Mhm.
in there with your standard protocol mindset or experience and
With
inadvertently
really good intentions, but
completely good intentions, right? And
Mhm.
then totally accidentally make a mess of things. Um, and also sometimes after you get that specialized training, it feels clunky, it feels messy, and you will make a mistake. But as you said, when you have a team of people with various levels of experience, and you can tap in, tap out, and you can support and mentor each other and learn from each other, you're able to mitigate and reduce the potential of any harm that might be happening. And so thank you for bringing that to our attention, because there is a distinct difference between intervening immediately after a crisis and what those goals are. The goal is
Mhm.
to not go through past, present, and future, do the entire high intensity intervention of EMDR. It's to use a lower intensity intervention, such as the assist or other crisis or early response interventions, so that folks can be stabilized and able to move through the next steps of whatever the aftermath of that crisis is, from a grounded enough place. They may not
Yes.
feel completely centered or like their regular self, but they're grounded enough to be able to move forward. And then they have a connection with you or whoever to continue
Mhm.
any sort of therapy or ongoing support through that process. So they're not alone either. I
Well, and
also,
I'm glad you said that because that's
yeah,
the goal too, right? Is what you said is referrals. So once that initial screening and stabilization has done, or maybe someone does require a higher level of care, well, that's when maybe you are now referring to somebody who's going to do full individual, standard protocol, or maybe one of the more individual early interventions that we have at our fingertips. So
exactly.
I think that's a great distinction.
Yeah, yeah. And I also appreciate you highlighting the importance of group work, for the very realities that there aren't enough therapists. We'd have to all be therapists in order to be able to support all of us individually. So being able to provide groups is wonderful for the therapist, but it's also wonderful for the people that are experiencing, or have experienced the adverse event and are
Mhm.
seeking support through that, because um, that joining a group intervention such as the EMDR IGTP, which is one of our protocols in our GAP training, they're able to process what happened. And this is not necessarily, crisis intervention. It would be later on, a few months later, after they've gone through stabilization work. But they're able to be together with people that are healing or recovering or moving through whatever language they choose that feels right for them in their process together. They're not alone in it, but they also don't have to explain everything. They don't have to talk, 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 and kind of reveal their most, painful parts of it to, 20 other people
Mhm.
or 100 other people. They're able to be together and have the really beneficial effects of what we say healing in community, right? We often in therapy are one-on-one with a therapist, which can be great, serves a purpose, truly does. And also being able to heal in community in various ways, whether it be an EMDR intervention and other things, is also another important aspect of individual healing and the healing of a community as a whole, because most folks in a TRN are responding to more community-based incidences, right?
Mhm.
A fire or community violence, something like that. There are a lot of people impacted. And as we know, trauma has a ripple effect.
Yep.
And if we support ourselves, if we get the support we need and the healing we need, we're able to kind of further that and create a ripple with our communities. But when we all kind of do it together, right, that ripple is much more, is stronger, and it ripples out a little faster. And it also helps to keep communities together and not maybe completely fall apart after something, right? And they're able to access the resources they need to access. They're able to support their kids or get support for their kids. And the community is able to create a sense or sustain a sense of wellness together as they're moving through it. And that's a really important part. I know Dr. Nacho talks about that a lot as well,
Mhm.
because that's most of his work is in community in the field with a bunch of people, all from the same area. And he really wants that community to be together in that healing process because that is crucially important. It's not something that might feel like second nature to all of us in the US
Mhm.
or westernized places because, communal living or we're more used to a kind of individualistic point of view when it comes to healing and just kind of living and being in relationship. But when we apply that aspect of community support and healing in community and growing in community and moving through really traumatic, hard, confusing, overwhelming situations together, we're able to create the type of community that we want to be going forward
Mhm.
after that response. And so I really think that being able to engage in something like EMDR protocols that are designed for disaster response, or early intervention, or even, if it is maybe a year or two later, right? But it's designed to support that type of healing and care. I think that is really beneficial to folks because the community benefits as a whole, and it supports the wellness of the community.
Yeah. So a couple of things that as you're talking, I want to just highlight with because I absolutely agree with you. One of the things we talked about is training, and you to do group interventions, it's important to make sure that you're trained in group and working with group dynamics. Because as you said, especially in our culture where we are approaching an individualistic culture, it's really important to understand how much is too much in sharing in a group setting and how much is too little and how to create that safety for people to do that really important work. So that's another thing that I wanted to touch on. The other thing that with when you talk about community, I absolutely agree that we are going to see more and more community events, whether it is violence, acts of violence, but also with climate change and climate emergencies. And so not only is our response, right, our planned response and our doing groups or working with community members or even, you know, thinking about stigma, a lot of what the TRNs are doing too is that education. So before disaster happens, going around meeting the first responders, meeting community leaders, leaders of churches or religious institutions, leaders of schools, of other government agencies, educating them on trauma and trauma response, as well as community resiliency. And so I think a big part of that community work, it doesn't stop or start just at a disaster, right? It's ongoing, and our TRNs are part of communities, and I think that's the most important thing is that we talk about is that TRN is part of it. They've had shared experiences, and how do we prepare as well as respond in a way that is meaningful and that builds healing, decreases stigma, and um, most importantly, builds community resiliency.
Wonderful. Yep. Yep, we agree that preparing ahead as much as you can
Mhm.
will support you and others when the time comes, because it's just a matter of when. And it's likely that it's something already happened in your community. And now you're like, okay, I'm ready for the next one. The next time
Yeah.
I want to be involved. And I want to know what I'm doing a little bit more, and I want to know who's available. I love the encouragement of going around and meeting folks, like who exists, who's here, in organized places and entities, government organizations, and also who's here as like your neighbors, right? Who's
Yeah.
like, do you have like certain groups in your neighborhood? Do you have certain community um programs that you can connect with as well? I think about our community. So I'm in Fort Collins, Colorado, and we have a really wonderful organization called the BIPOC Alliance, and we do a lot of really cool things in the community. And one of those is a family program where we are able to get together as families, different families of color, um, and just support our kids as they're going through school and different social situations where they might be experiencing the impacts or direct acts of white supremacy or racism. and also how we navigate that as parents. And also we just have fun together, right? And so if I wasn't involved or if I didn't know about it, I wouldn't know that that is a perfect group of folks to get to know as someone who is interested in or committed to responding to community trauma or adverse experiences,
Mhm.
because those are folks who will be impacted or who are highly connected to other folks in the community, and they will need to know who you are, right? When
Mhm.
or if something happens, they will need to know who you are. So it doesn't have to be only the schools, only the first responders, only the churches. Find and seek out those community organizations that also need you as a therapist,
Yes.
as someone who is invested in the well-being of their community, of their experiences as well. I think that's really, really cool. And I also want to recognize that, especially post-COVID, lockdown and all that, it can feel awkward going out there and being like, hey. I think a lot of us got used to not doing that anymore. So do what feels right to you as you're going out there trying to figure out who else do I need to know. Um, you will be surprised at the resources and the support that people are willing to offer, because it doesn't just take therapists to help communities recover and heal. It takes all types of folks. And so I think another aspect in preparing for crisis response work is to know who else, right? What other skill sets, what other capacities, what other groups of people. You might need different types of care workers to help with children, to help with folks in the community who are disabled. They have different skill sets, right? Not that you have to be, the hub of everything, right? Know everyone. But I think knowing some of those other folks and those other organizations can also be beneficial. And that again speaks to the power of having a team. I think your crisis response team can include different types of folks with different experiences beyond a therapeutic experience. So, um, yeah. And one thing that we have on our Scaling Up website, it's new in terms of like it's a new web page. um, because we were like, we need to get a web page up there because it'll just be easier to direct folks to it when they ask. We have a crisis response preparedness page now that guides folks through like a couple of resources for free so they can get started in thinking about what do I need to do? Who do I need to talk to? What's even available to me if I'm EMDR trained? What's available to me if I'm not EMDR trained, but I still want to be involved? And so we want to be able to support folks in any of those places along the way. We also recognize that not everyone wants to learn EMDR, and that's okay. We will be a little sad, but that's okay. Uh, we have other
We
ways.
might be a little biased.
We love EMDR, but we also know that there are
Yeah.
many ways to support folks through crisis.
Hmm.
And so we encourage folks to check that out as well, because it could be a good primer. So in addition to hopping on the HAP website and FEMA and any other local organizations, Red Cross, I don't even know, like there's so many of them.
Yeah, and the Medical Reserve Corps, the Red Cross. I mean, there's just so many really great organizations out there.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Let's transition to talking about this conference. I'm really
Yeah.
excited about the conference. I would love folks to also feel excited about the conference because now you know why the conference exists, right? The conference exists to bring folks together, to provide high quality training in EMDR protocols that meet the needs and the demands of crisis and humanitarian responses, and also helps folks learn other skills that are necessary when responding to crisis, create
Mhm.
connections, have some fun. I think there's dancing involved.
Yeah.
One of the nights. So let's talk about it. Tell us about the conference, get folks excited, and then we'll give all the logistics after that.
Yes. So we have a pre-conference, which we are partnering with Scaling Up, and they will be providing the GAP training on August 13th and 14th, all day. And then on August 14th, which is Thursday night, we will kick off the welcome ceremony for our conference. And it's a party. We're going to have some hors d'oeuvres and drinks, and it's a big celebration of our 30th anniversary. And we may have some cameo appearances of people who helped start HAP and really changed the world when you think about EMDR. And then Friday morning is the start of our actual conference. And we start off and kick off with a keynote where we are bringing together four of the leaders in EMDR early interventions. And Reg Morrow will be moderating. And Reg has just released a book in the last year around EMDR group interventions.
Wonderful.
And so we will have Dr. Ignacio Herrero or Nacho, along with Dr. Gary Quinn, Phil Manfield, and Elon Shapiro. And so all will be there talking about their different EMDR informed early interventions. And the goal here again is to show we are better together. Many times we see this division or this camps of I only do the G suite, I only do the GAP suite, I only do Flash. I only do ISP, and what we're saying is there's a place for all of them, and it's important to know to be trained and have access so we can respond better together. And then the conference takes place Friday and Saturday, and then we end Saturday night with our big HAP dance. And this is, I'm going to tell you, there's a lot of history here, and it is one of the most fun events where we all just come together, our hearts, and we dance our hearts out. And there'll be, food and drink and just a lot of connection. And really what sets this conference apart from other conferences is it is smaller and it is a heart connection. We are working together to help each other learn and grow and be able to be there and respond and to support the world. And so I think that's what sets this conference apart is that heart connection and the celebration and brainstorming. Man, there's so much brainstorming on how we can um, make things better and more easy to access as well as increase research. So
Yes.
lots of good stuff.
Wonderful. Yes, we are better together.
Yeah.
We truly are. And it would be really challenging to be committed to community response, crisis intervention, all of those things, without thinking that. It would be really
Mhm.
challenging. And so living that as well. So I'm really excited for this keynote panel, hearing from everyone. I'll be there. I'm really excited. And I think folks will get a lot out of it, not just from like an academic perspective or a clinical perspective, but also a relationship perspective.
Mhm.
An opportunity to just come together and have a good time and be together as people that have been doing really heavy work for a long time. It's nice to get together with people that get it. You don't have to explain a whole lot, right? You're just there. Um,
Mhm.
and building those connections and relationships. And Denver, Colorado is a great place to host the conference. We have a lot of EMDR clinicians in Colorado and in surrounding areas. And so I'm really excited to be able to meet more folks. I'm from Colorado. I'm in Colorado right now. I know you are too, Lori. So we're just
I'm in Colorado. Yep.
great time meeting even more clinicians. And as you mentioned, you do not have to be a TRN member. You don't have to be a HAP member of any kind to join the conference. You're welcome to register for the conference and the pre-conference training. You can register for the pre-conference training as you're registering for the conference. So get those two tickets at the same time. Super easy to do that on the website. But I believe you will really want to become a TRN member after this conference. So just be prepared to join a TRN after this if you haven't already.
Yeah, and something I want to highlight too is that Scaling Up has graciously really reduced the cost of the Gap Suite training. So this is one of your opportunities to really receive this amazing suite of trainings together at a low cost, as well as our conference. We have tried to price it so that it is anybody can access it, as well as there are discounts for nonprofits, TRN volunteers or faculty members and students. So we want to make sure that we make this available and accessible to as many people out there. There was one more thing I wanted to say. I lost my train of thought. It should come back.
It'll come back. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, that was the other thing. It is recommended that you finish your basic EMDR training to come to the conference, because for continuing education or the EMDRIA credits, you will not be eligible for the EMDRIA credits unless you've finished your basic training, because those are considered advanced training credits. And then lastly, if you attend the conference, you will receive access to videotaped presentations on our learning management system for free. I don't have the exact time frame. I think it might be 90 days, so don't quote me on that. But you will have access to any of the lectures or workshops that you couldn't attend. There are a few that we aren't recording, but for the most part, all of them will be recorded, and we'll announce which ones won't be recorded. Yeah, so it's a great opportunity.
Great. Wonderful. All right. Where can people go to register?
Yeah. So two places you can go. You can start just at our HAP website, and that will take you to a link to our Whova platform. And our HAP website is, as I want to say it correctly because my brain is emdrhap.org. And on there, you can scroll down and it will have just a conference button. It will take you to a conference page. And then once you're there, there's also a register now, and it will take you to the registration and have all the information. We also have a 30th anniversary website that I'd love for people to visit to learn more about us and on different ways to get involved. And that is emdrhap.org / 30th dash anniversary. And you can also access a link on our main website on emdrhap.org. But in it, we are also introducing something that is near and dear to our heart. And you kind of talked about ripples earlier, Robyn. We are introducing something called the Shapiro effect. And it's about making an impact, right? It's about one person can make an impact that ripples on beyond themselves, beyond their communities. And that's really what Dr. Francine Shapiro did when she created HAP. She was a humanitarian at heart. And so we want to invite everybody to be a part of the Shapiro effect. We do have different merchandise you can purchase to celebrate the 30th anniversary and the Shapiro effect. And proceeds again will go towards funding programs such as our research. We'll be increasing our scholarships this year. So right now we are providing between 20 and 30 scholarships to students, but now we will also be building out a program to provide scholarships to people working in community mental health nonprofits, agencies, right, to help them be trained in EMDR therapy too, and to receive consultation at discounted prices. As well as we have our Francine Shapiro Disaster Relief Fund, which then helps with our disaster response, our building out our TRNs and international work.
Wonderful. Can't wait.
Mhm.
I'll put all the links that you discussed in the description of the video so folks can click on those easily from watching the video. Um,
Mhm.
yes. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Lori. This was such a great conversation. Glad we got to talk a little bit. I learned a lot more about you and your, journey. And I'm really excited to see the growth of HAP going forward and get more connected to folks at the conference in Denver this August.
Yeah.
So please join us if you're watching this and you've been on the fence. Please join us. We'd love to have you. You are welcome there. We are better with you, so please come.
Yes.
And yeah, we would love to be able to support your registration however we can. So if you have questions about the pre-conference EMDR gap training, feel free to reach out to us at Scaling Up, and our email is info@scalingupemdr.com, and we'll answer any conference questions that we can answer, but if we can't, we'll just direct you to Lori and team for those questions. And we definitely want to see you there. So please come.
Yeah, and one other thing I want to say is that internationally there are many HAPs and trauma aids and other EMDR humanitarian organizations worldwide, and we welcome you at this conference too. And I know there's been some concern about international travel to the United States. If you have a concern and you would like to come, you can email conference@emdrhap.org and we will write a letter stating that you intend to attend our conference for educational purposes, so you can have it on hand. So we definitely would love our international colleagues and peers to join us also.
Yes, thank you for that reminder, and offering that letter. I think that'll be really supportive and helpful
Mhm.
for a lot of folks.
Yeah.
Well, anything else before we go?
No, thank you for this time, and we're so excited to see everyone there, and I'm very excited to dance with all of you guys.
Yes. So get your dance moves ready, brush up on your TikTok dances if you have any you've been working on. No, just kidding. But yeah, I'm really excited as well. Can't wait to see you all there. And we'll be seeing you soon.
Yep, thank you.